Hi everyone. Welcome to this monthly French Tech Connect hosted by French Tech Seoul and in partnership with FAISE and Invest in Grenoble. So I'm very happy to welcome every one of you here today. I am Isabelle, the Vice President of French Tech Seoul, and I'm just taking a few seconds to introduce the session and also introduce you to the platform so that you know how you can interact with us today. So today's session is going to be about Korea and how it can be an opportunity for a French startup and also have learnings and discussion and insights from people from our community who are currently in Korea working on developing their own startup and business. So today's session is going to go with first a presentation from Hailey on how is Korea and what is the Korean landscape. And then we're going to have a fireside session with Nael-Pierre, Tristan, Leo, Jaikrishnan, and Guillaume. And after that, we're going to have time for Q&A. So please don't hesitate to put them in the chat or in the Q&A session. And once we're done with that, we're going to be happy to have you stay with us for the networking. For those who know how AirMeet works, you already have the reflex of staying after the session to talk to each other. So really don't hesitate at any time. So just to show you quickly how the platform works. So you're going to see on your right a little chat. You're going to have a Q&A part where you can ask all of your questions, and we're going to be able to answer them at the end of the session. You're going to be able to also raise your hand if any of you want to come up stage and ask your question live. And you can also send us some love down on the bottom of your screen. So I'm not going to take any more time. I think I basically said everything. So it's up to you, Hailey.
Thank you. So let me share my screen first. Can everybody see it? So yeah, welcome to Korea. So for today, I'm gonna talk about this exciting country, which is dynamic ICT engaged to Asia. So first, I'm gonna talk about the FAISE program, which is the French Alps International Soft Landing Exchange. As most of you already know, the FAISE is a project financed by the French government through its initiative La French Tech. The idea is to support the international development of local startups in each ecosystem by giving entrepreneurs all the necessary information to choose the right site for their international landing. It also aims to increase the visibility of secondary ecosystems, which are not as well known as destinations such as Silicon Valley, Boston, Paris, or Shanghai, but maybe a better fit for some startups. We already had programs in different countries, including Taiwan, British Columbia, and European countries such as Switzerland and Germany. So for an international entrepreneur, setting up a business in a foreign country is not only a professional adventure, but also it's a life choice. So this program aims at giving entrepreneurs the tools and partners they needed to take this amazing leap of faith. Participants will be able to proceed with launching operations in a new country or decided to take intermediate steps to enable them to move forward when timely. Even at the startup stage, there are strategic issues at stake in terms of international development. This is a topic many startups and entrepreneurs have to address very early on when they plan the development of their company, and they needed support in doing so. This observation motivated several stakeholders from the French Alps, along with some of our trusted long-term international partners to launch a safe landing program. So let me introduce who I am. So I'm here based in Seoul, Korea. So I'm a director for the Korea Business Development for Investing Grenoble-Alpes. So Investing Grenoble-Alpes is part of Grenoble-Alpes Metropolitan Area Authority. We promote Grenoble-Alpes and its surrounding departments' economic development and local economic appeal in conjunction with the regional Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes Enterprises Agency. Our extensive knowledge of the local ecosystem, along with our ability to work closely with a wide variety of economic actors, locally and regionally and also internationally, have made it possible for us to offer complementary, which is the bespoke support for companies exploring opportunities and setting up in the area. So let me talk about the Korean startups ecosystem. So I would like to talk about the CCEI, which is Center for Creative Economy and Innovation in South Korea. This is very long like the French Tech. So the CCEI was set up in Daegu City in September 2014. You can see the Daegu on the right bottom. Ever since then, a total of 19 centers for creative economy and innovation have been established in cities and provinces all across South Korea. All the centers are operated by the government, and therefore this shows how the Korean government's dedication to an innovative and creative economy. Data shows that to date, CCI helped over 1,200 startups in Korea increase their sales revenue, which has led to the hiring of over 1,400 employees. Startups at these centers have made great contributions to the Korean economy by creating competitive products and services. With the support of the government, many startups now have a chance to not only succeed in Korea, but globally as well. Furthermore, there has been a rise in the number of South Korean startups, increasing partnerships with the global startup incubators, FAISES, and investors by the global networks of large corporations that are the part of the centers for creative economy and innovation. The 19 centers for CCEI, a hub for the innovative startups across the country, are supporting startups, which are the driving force of sustainable growth in Korea with various policies. The centers for creative economy and innovation performs two major tasks. So first, development and operation of the promotion work to encourage regional startups and also entrepreneurship. And second is supporting for strengthening the capacity of pre-entrepreneurs and startup companies, linking them with related organization and programs. So let me talk about some unicorn, like the Korea's rise in the startup. These are some of the unicorn startups in Korea. So 2020 and 2021 were the big years for the Korean startup ecosystem in spite of COVID-19. The CB Insights shows that Korea now has 15 Korean unicorn startups. To qualify as a unicorn privately, as you know, the owned startups has to have a valuation of over $1 billion. Therefore, they cannot be listed on a stock exchange or have merged with another company. This is why you will not see Coupang, which is the e-commerce platform, on this list, as they went public in 2021 on the New York stock market. These startup unicorns in Korea shows that Korea is growing as one of the leading tech hubs in the world. Korea is now in fourth place among the countries with the most startup unicorns at 15. The United States comes in at number one with 206, then China, which is like almost 170. The Korea's rise in the startup unicorns rankings is due to the strong mobile infrastructure, venture boom, and government support in Korea. There are many new Korean VC firms looking to find the next Korean unicorn, and the Korean government hopes to push the number of unicorns to 20 in 2022 next year. Soon you will see some of the founders of these unicorn startups in Korea becoming one of the top richest people in South Korea. So let me introduce some of the emerging startups in Korea. I think for the startups in France, you may be interested in how's the ecosystem for the startups and what kinds of the contents are existing here. So let me introduce the first Morai. This is an autonomous startup specializing in providing solutions for self-driving (VNV). In addition to their solutions for autonomous vehicle, they also provide simulations to their customers, which are built and run on a bespoke basis. This is great, as with their simulation, an autonomous vehicle will not need to go out on the open road to the test it, keeping people safe. And second is you can see the Coach. This is a company dedicated to the reaching machine listening tech, a key focus in artificial intelligence and home intelligence technology. Current solutions can only understand the limited speech patterns, and Coach helps make this recognition feature more advanced and wide-ranging in detection. And second is Finda, which is a fintech startup that provides a comparison solution for various financial services and productions. And fourth, you can see Olive Healthcare, which is a Korean health-based startup that specializes in digital healthcare and diagnostics. And I would like to introduce the Fast5, which is a premium office space rental startup that provides its services without the premium pricing and a deposit. And LinkFlow is an exciting and innovative photography startup that has been spearheading the development of wearable 360-degree cameras. And TOS, which was I already mentioned on the previous slide as a unicorn. TOS is a fintech startup either that provides customers with a way to access financial products such as loan, investment, credit reports, insurance, and payments from their mobile devices. And in final, the Bagel Labs is a startup that gets rid of the need of measuring tape and insurance that you always have the power to measure in your pocket. So for like this, we have a lot of the emerging startups in different industry from the platform and also some fintech, etc. So I would like to talk about case startup for the French startups who is looking for the initial market entry to Korea. Maybe for our next speakers, they're gonna talk about their experience for the case startup Grand Challenge. This is happened in the Pangyo district, which is the Korean Silicon Valley. And the government provides all the programs like acceleration program, mentoring, and also office spaces, etc. So for every Grand Challenge, the period they select 60 global startup teams. So once you are selected, you can be provided from office spaces to the settlement fund either. So it's more like the French Tech visa program. So these are the general landscape in Korea. So I hope to see you soon in Korea. So I am here based in Korea. So if you have any questions, just drop me the email or the phone call message, etc. Thank you.
Oh, good. I think it's probably my turn. Thank you very much, Hailey. So after that great presentation, I hope all you guys have a little bit of a clearer idea of what's going on in Korea. We'll try to get a little bit deeper in the chat we'll have now. We thought it would be a good idea to have kind of a mix of entrepreneurs that have set up their operation in Korea, startups, French startup that also just joined and just arrived in Korea through the K Startup Grand Challenge, and a couple of other people, including me, working in corporates in those big Korean companies that sometimes happen to invest in startups and in French startups. So I will briefly present myself, then let the other guests do the same, and then we'll dive right into the questions. So myself, my name is Guillaume Parvex. I work at Hyundai Motor Group. I work in the innovation division in the Open Innovation and Investment Group. So you kind of guess what I'm doing over there. We are working with startups, obviously in the field of mobility, but also in energy, smart factory, smart city, and tons of other sectors. I'd be happy to talk more about this a bit later. I'm working mostly on European startups and Singaporean startups. Hyundai is investing in Korea, but also globally. So also happy to talk about this a little bit later. And now I'll pass the mic to Nael-Pierre, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you very much, Guillaume. So Guillaume and I both working for Korean conglomerates. I'm working for another one called GS. Maybe I'll give you a bit of a brief. I think most people are very aware of the Korean conglomerates, but just in case there are a few people who are newer, I'll tell you a little bit about GS so I can pitch to you a little bit, and I hope you'll contact me after. But GS is a Korean conglomerate that's relatively traditional historically, and we really operate in three main sectors. So that's energy, retail, and construction. In terms of energy assets that we have, it's across the board from power production to refining to distribution with a lot of petrol stations. Retail, we recently had a merger between GS Shop and GS Retail. So now it's one entity, but we do both online and offline retail. In terms of offline retail, we have, I think, 320-ish supermarkets. All the convenience stores you see around you, GS25s, I think there are 15K of them these days. And we also operate the Parnas hotels. And in terms of online, we started off super traditional. So we were one of the early and still top in TV home shopping, which is still popular in Korea, although I'd say our customers are aging with us. And we've also kind of moved into e-commerce, and we've done that quite successfully. In terms of where we invest, we're really looking at the future of a lot of these businesses. In energy, we recognize that the system's generally becoming more renewable, distributed, consumer-driven, and we recognize that we can't get into this transition by ourselves. We're trying to find partners, startups, friends that we can do this together. Either we can be a client to startups or we can invest in them. There are many ways. But we've also been looking at a couple of new fields for us. We've done a couple of investments into biotech, and industrial biotech is also a key sector for us. I'll pass on a minute, but just briefly about myself. So Nael-Pierre NUSEIBEH, I work for the GS Holdings entity at GS. It's my fourth year here. I spent 2 years at the retail sector, investing really in consumer retail. I invested primarily in the Middle East initially, and these days, for the last 2 years, I've been investing primarily in Europe and the US. So I'll leave my email if you're interested to connect with myself, if you're interested to connect with GS or any core businesses. We'd love to make your experience in Korea and working with Korean chaebols as pleasant as possible. Thank you very much. Thank you, Guillaume.
Thank you. Tristan, maybe up to you.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the invitation again. So I'm Tristan Roussel. I've been an entrepreneur in the tech field for more than 20 years. My first company was a biotech company. And I founded in 2014 a new company called Aryballe. So Aryballe is developing a quite smart and maybe innovative solution to analyze smell. So it's an artificial nose. You may imagine several applications. This is indeed what we do. One of the motivation to come to Korea was the participation to our capital of two main Korean companies, namely Hyundai and also Samsung with their venture part, right? And so we decided a bit more than a year ago to create a subsidiary in Seoul. So I was directly in charge of that. So I spent 3 months last fall in the city, in Gangnam, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm going to share some of this. During these 3 months, I had the chance to hire an application engineer who is also managing our subsidiary. So his name is Eric Kim. I think he's there today. You can also speak directly with him. Personally, now I go back and forth between France and Korea, spend as much time as I can in Seoul, but of course, I have quite a lot to do here in Grenoble. So I guess we'll discuss this later. Thank you, Guillaume.
Merci. Thank you, Tristan. Maybe Leo, if you'd like to go next.
Yeah, sure. So currently I'm working for a company called Dawn Technology, and our first product is Bob, the smallest and fastest dishwasher in the world. Bob stands for 2 or 3 people and is made in France. We designed it to be eco-friendly by consuming less water and energy. Moreover, Bob is made of 100% of recycled material. And let's add more, like Bob is also smart devices. He has his own operating system, Wi-Fi, and also we designed it like a small cardboard detergent system. So you just need to plug it, and with this way we will have like 30 cycles. So don't need to use other detergents, and it's really a convenient way to use a dishwasher. Bob also has his UVC sanitized system, so that you can put inside your face mask, smartphone, key, whatever you want, and of course this cycle is without water. And yeah, I think that's it for me. If you have any question, please free to ask me.
Great, thank you. I think we'll have a lot more questions. So maybe GK, up to you.
Yeah. Thanks, William. Can you hear me? Is it okay?
Perfect.
All right. Thanks. So thank you for inviting me today. Being part of French Tech Seoul, it's a great opportunity. Thank you for it. My name is Jaikrishnan, and I'm the CEO of the company called Grenoble-Alpes. We are based out of Aix-en province in southern France. And what our solution does is we optimize every charging cycle for EVs. So whether it be based on like your energy prices, whether it's based on your demand charges, based on your renewable energy generation, how much of your solar is generating at what point of time, and also based on how the users are participating. See, I as an EV driver doesn't know what's happening with the grid, but then I give a platform to engage them to say that, well, if the grid is having a congestion issue, and if you actually respond to it, I'll get some benefits. So those 3 or 4 different parameters are utilized by us to optimize every charging cycle. Now, so by optimizing that, we can actually reduce the OPEX of charging infrastructure by 20%. And it can differ based on different geolocations that you're looking at. What we did so far, well, we have a project with a consortium of partners with SNC of Gary Connection and Nissan in the XTGB train station, which is a vehicle-to-grid integration project, at the train station to facilitate an auto-consumption model for the train station. And how a customer who parks their car can actually turn it to a distributed storage and then facilitate auto-consumption at the train station. And it's also participating in the ecosystem of environment, climate change, and that's very important also, the impact. And Just to add some stats to it, with 15 cars, 1-5, we could manage a peak load of a train station for 4 hours in terms of a blackout. And there are 5,000 car parks. 80% of cars park more than 8 hours, 30% park more than a day. Imagine 10% of those cars going to be, as a value asset, going to be how much value not to the train station, but to the grid. And that's what the project gave us. We're also part of 2 European Commission projects and also working with DSOs in Turkey and Austria, mainly on the charging infrastructure, how to facilitate, how to manage the charging, how to bring in smart charging, managed charging, and vehicle-to-grid integration. Why Korea? Well, 135,000 EVs on the road right now. It's estimated to be 3 million by 2025, with 500K charging stations by 2025 as well. That's a market you have. Plus, you're also looking at, your commercial customers, all looking at net zero target emission. That's the important. Next decade is going to be that. Now, it's not just like improving the process of efficiency, but it's also important to how do you consume. That's important as well, and how that actually benefits the net zero target emission. So what we are looking at is there's a program called KEV 100, which is actually looked up by all these corporates, which is funded and subsidized by government. And if they convert their fleets to EVs, then they are probably, rather than consuming at the building, if they charge their car, they're actually providing better carbon footprint. That's where I feel there's a growth as well facilitating it. That's what we are looking at. We're looking at partners in the local market to facilitate their growth, and potentially investors either through Hyundai or through GS Energy as we speak. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I think perfect presentation. And now I feel so much better, more comfortable buying a wonderful Kia or Hyundai, knowing you have my back when I want to charge it. Thank you very much. Maybe Hailey, you already kind of presented yourself earlier, so up to you if you want to say another word now, or if you can just go right into the questions.
No, yeah, let's go for the questions.
All right, all good. Maybe, GK, you kind of answered that first question, but maybe Leo can take it as well. Simply, why did you come to Korea? And maybe if the main reason to come to Korea was the K-Startup Grand Challenge, you could elaborate a little bit on, what it is and what's your current situation over there and the feedback, because as Hailey mentioned, it's a great program for incoming startups, and I'm sure you've been here for a few months already, so I'm sure you have a lot to say about this. So maybe Leo, if you'd like to start with this, and then up to you, GK, as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think for the most important part in KGC during COVID-19 is like a really good way to have a visa to enter in the Korean market, because with the COVID-19 the border is closed and you need to have a visa to come here. So the KGC office helped us so much to obtain this visa, and yes, it was a really long way to obtain this visa. Second important thing, I think it's like, as you already might know, all households in Korea is like constitute about 80% of the household in Korea is constitute for about 1 or 2 people. So for our small dishwasher, it's a really important market for us, but not only Korea, also the Japanese market. And as you already might know, Korea could be for us like a first step in the Asia country. And if we are successful in Korea, it will be much easier for us to enter all the other Asian countries.
Great.
Yeah,
I think, sorry, Leo. I think, that's probably a good summary of a lot of companies are facing when they come here, and that's why they use the K-Startup Grand Challenge, probably facilitation to get facilitation with visa, and then why the country. I think the market is obviously interesting, as you said, and Korea as an entry door to other markets, potentially China, potentially Japan. So yeah, thanks a lot. GK, maybe if you want to add a little something on why Korea and a brief, a few words on the K-Startup Grand Challenge.
Yeah, I think why Korea, it's a market and the growth in the EV space as well as on the charging infrastructure space, and we see that there's a potential in terms of commercial and industrial customers as fleet operators increasing more of EV fleets, and and the government subsidizing the charging infrastructure, and so that's stemming the growth, and we feel that there's a value add that we can bring on. So that's definitely, and also looking at being hub. I'm more looking at the hub, not just the Asian context, but also the hub in terms of the west coast of US. And when you look at technologies like the battery technologies and things like that, which is very prominent in Korean market, which is also something that we want to engage with. And so those are the reasons why and with the KSGC startup program, well, it's sponsored by NIPA, which is the government agency, and from my thought process, selecting 60 people, 60 startup around the globe, from the globe, we are part of one of it. It encourages us when a government is inviting us as a startup. So it's giving us the right kind of facility and looking at to provide it's not that settlement funding, but it's it's just the notion about supporting a startup ecosystem to enter the market. And I'm a people person, so I love the kind of engagement and the feel of 60 startups working together in that ecosystem. It's not just your innovation alone, but you're actually contributing and listening to other people's also, and that's very important for us. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I think I'll take one question in the Q&A immediately from Michelle, because I think it's kind of linked to what we just discussed. Do you believe mandatory to be present in the country to do business with Korea? I think we can probably go to you, Tristan, with this one, and then that will help us jump into the question number 2.
Well, it's a very good question. Indeed, I guess Leo explained, right? COVID-19 kinds of change things we are organizing business development internationally. For Aryballe, we signed a very nice contract, commercial contract, without being present in Korea. So it's not mandatory. This was done before we decided to even create a subsidiary. At the time, we were just going back and forth, with a technical team. So it was not mandatory. What was mandatory was to have some introduction. So actually, when you have in mind those big chaebols, the techno one, automotive, appliances, electronics, you may know that they have a lot of activity in Europe, and part of this activity is scouting. So eventually they will look for you, okay? And they will find you. However, my experience was that until you get an invitation to come to Korea to display your demo, to discuss a partnership, it will not go very far. It's my experience, and maybe others have other experience, but at some point, anyway, you will have to come, ideally being invited. And that's what I've done, actually, after the creation of the subsidiary. We had some contacts, through CES or different conference, and it's only by being there that we could, after a few months, start a real business, project. And this is thanks to the fact that we are present, and that when you're present, you can really find the right people that will help you engage into a business relation. Sorry, I was a bit long, but I have a mixed experience, so it's not black or white, but definitely I would very much favor the presence.
Thank you, Tristan. And maybe here with Nael-Pierre, we can add a little something.
Yes.
Personally. So at Hyundai, obviously, I was not there when Tristan actually started talking with Hyundai, but I do it now on a daily basis, and it's especially true for global startups, obviously. Coming to Korea, having the capacity to talk directly to the internal business unit that could potentially be your internal sponsor to get either a commercial contract, a POC going on, or an investment is crucial. The thing to always keep in mind is the Korean ecosystem is very, very developed now. If you come here with a technology, there are a lot of chances that there is a Korean company working on that type of solution already. I'm sure it was not the case for Aryballe, but I'm sure for most of the other companies, you would have a Korean competitor. And the internal teams here, they will obviously pick the Korean competitor before you, because it's easier to communicate. Culturally, it's also a lot easier. So it's something you have to be mindful of and pick the right connection. I think we will, in the other question, delve a little bit more into this, but yeah, I think it's really important to be here for extended period of time and prepare your trip accordingly as well. And then Nael-Pierre, I don't know if you have a little bit more on this.
Yeah, actually, Guillaume, that's more or less exactly from my experience as well. I think the times that we have done or we've contacted people overseas for specific projects, usually it's either because we have a very specific need and we've done some kind of good research and kind of funneled it down and then contacted people directly, or more likely than that, we are invested into multiple funds, for example, in Europe or the US, and those funds recommend those startups for us to have a look at. So they may or may not be invested in them, but you do seem to have as Guillaume mentioned, we like to, unless we have a very specific need, we like to either initially try to find locally or otherwise utilize our friends overseas to help us find some good opportunities. So if you know a couple of funds who are invested in who have Korean investors, then that's a great start. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if any of thank you, Nael-Pierre. I don't know if any of the others have more on this. If not, I think we can jump right into the second question. Back to you, Tristan. Actually, that was quite similar to what we just mentioned, but this one might be a little bit more general. As a French entrepreneur in Korea, what is the number one or the two most important things you have to do when you actually arrive here to set up your operations?
Well, yes. So, and that's why, I mean, those soft landing programs are very good. And they're quite recent, actually. My experience, I've seen that for the first time maybe 10 years ago in the US, and I've always, I'm a bit more old school because when I began to be an entrepreneur, those did not exist. And actually, I don't consider my company to be eligible for those soft landing program because we are maybe a bit too advanced. So in the old school approach, there is still the possibility to rely on, French organization in the countries where you want to go. And I'm talking about embassies, I'm talking about chamber of commerce, I'm talking about, yes, there are some initiatives, including in the field of accelerators or the French Tech, of course. That's what we do as well. And personally at Aryballe, we chose the French Korean Chamber of Commerce. As I guess it was more for personal reason. What I've seen there, I get on very well with Cedric, the CEO. And we have very easy discussion, very good collaboration. And of course, what they offer was perfectly adapted to what we were looking for. So meaning an office space, colleagues around, other, not French, but at least other people in the same situation. So that because you feel comfy, right? You feel well, you feel, so you're not too isolated because that's one of the main risks. So this was important. At Aryballe, we had the chance to have a budget to hire an employee, and And of course, when you're in this situation as well, so this was my second main focus, find someone to replace me. Eric, I don't know if you will do this, but at least this is, he's there, right? So Eric Kim, he has a specific background. He's quite young, much younger than me, but he spent 12 years in the US, right? So he has a dual culture, American and Korean. And I guess for me, it was also very reassuring because I may not have followed the rule for this because I was suggested to hire experienced Korean business developer who had a portfolio, who had also already contacts in the industry, which was not the case for Eric. But I chose the advantage of him understanding very well our quite specific technology and as well as understanding me, I guess. Yes, so again, those are always a bit personal. You have to adapt to each project, but for us, it has been working well.
Great, thank you. I haven't seen Eric send hearts or things like that. I think you should. That's the right moment.
That's him.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, very good point. I think the last thing you mentioned is very important. I don't think there is one perfect recipe, right? It really depends on the stage of the company, obviously, your finances, who you already know, and the feeling you have with the people you hire. So same for FKCCI. I think the French Chamber is doing a great job. There are obviously tons of programs and partner in Korea that can help as well. So I think it's good not to close the door, and especially with those more old school organization, right? With the embassy, the French Chamber of Commerce, French Tech. Some people might believe, that it's too French for me. I won't go there. But I can guarantee, and Tristan just mentioned it, and I'm sure GK and Leo will also agree on this. It's still good to rely on those more traditional organizations. They have a good network, and they do serious jobs. So don't forget them. Thank you, Tristan. Thank you a lot. I will leave you alone a little bit. I think we can. This one is a bit more of a general question, a bit more of a practical question. How is it these days? How difficult it is to come over to Korea for business with the sanitary pass, the quarantine measures, and etc. etc. I think GK and Leo can share their experience on how they got there, and maybe for people that live here, maybe Hailey or Nael-Pierre and I, we can share a little bit on the life here, just to let you know that actually from next week, the restriction will be lowered here in Korea. So it will be a little bit easier to actually, travel and live in the country. And the second point, very briefly, is we haven't experienced a full lockdown in Korea. It wasn't like it was in Europe or in some other countries. So it has been pretty good so far, despite a few ups and downs. So I don't know, maybe GK or Leo, if you want to talk briefly about your experience, and then we'll jump into the other question.
All right, I can just add. Well, first thing is like when you compare, when you came from Europe, or I actually came from India also, it's so different. It's very disciplined here. Which is good to actually see, because obviously that restricts the growth of COVID. But at the same time, as an entrepreneur who's coming for a program, when you are isolated in a room for 14 days, never have that experience before. It was tough. It was really tough. Just to get the 3 meals a day given outside the door, and you probably can hardly open the door, take the meal, and then that's it. So yeah, that was a personal experience. But I think the value of having a discipline, having a strict quarantine rule, is to arrest the growth. And I think in a larger perspective, it's important to do that, and people are actually following those principles and those discipline. And I see that as a whole, like the Korean culture is also very disciplined. So we just need to follow that, and I was happy to do that. That's from my end.
Thank you.
And for maybe I will just speak about all the administration stuff.
Maybe not all of it.
Yeah. I had more hard time with the administration from France than the administration from Korea. I think that's it.
I think everybody can understand, probably.
You're speaking about KVSC, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yeah. So this is it's not French per se, right? It's a delegation from the Korean embassy, and I had problems too, but they were overwhelmed a couple of months ago, I guess. Now I just got a new one, and in 1 week instead of 6 weeks, so they are doing better now.
Okay, well, thank you. I think this question we could talk about many things regarding the COVID. Obviously, I think we can do that a little bit later in the private rooms or answer questions. The main story is it was kind of messy maybe a few months ago. I think things are getting a little bit back to normal in Korea. Most people are vaccinated, and again from next week I think things will be a little bit easier. I'd like to take one question from Veronique, and maybe we can all jump in, but probably Nael-Pierre could answer this one. Could Korea be considered as a gateway to other Asian countries, or are things very different even in neighboring countries? I think it's a very good one. Nael-Pierre, if you'd like to get on this one.
Okay, short answer, yes, but long answer, it's useful to know exactly how you want to grow your business and which neighboring countries. Each Korean, especially larger business, some VCs, but certainly CVCs, will have interests in Southeast Asia. Some Korean conglomerates also have an interest in China. And so depending on where they're already operating, typically they can be very helpful in helping your business grow to that other region, especially if they have assets in that. So for example, for us in the GS retail side, we have assets in Southeast Asia. And so if we have a startup that we're working with here, we're more than happy to try and help them work in those regions as well. Very much the same on the energy side. But it's one of those things where you'll either, if you're lucky, if the website is easily readable, you'll have to just do a bit of the homework before and understand where they're operating specifically, and which team, or otherwise just kind of ask the team and the investors. But from my experience, and certainly that's, myself, I'm sure Guillaume, you would agree with your company and SK that I've spoken to, one of the key assets we can do is really help companies grow into those regions. There's a very strong Korean interest in Southeast Asia. China really depends on a per company basis, and similar with Japan as well. It's really very much a per company basis. So do a bit of research and then contact us, and if we're there, we're happy to help with that as well. Thank you for the question, Veronique. Guillaume, back to you.
Thank you. Yep, thank you. I mean, exactly the same. I think Southeast Asia, obviously, a lot of those big Korean companies have a lot of interest in Singapore, in Indonesia, in Vietnam, things like that. So it's probably a good idea for this. Hyundai just set up an open innovation office in Singapore to actually discover and do more business in Southeast Asia with startups. So it goes exactly that way. You have also, if I can mention, you have a few French companies that actually arrived, French startups that raised quite a lot of money that came to Korea recently to expand to different countries in the region. So you have Vestiaire Collective that have been here, I think, for a little while, and the Back Market that arrived recently as well. I think things will get a little bit more official soon, but to let you know that something that probably wouldn't have happened a few years ago, to pick Korea first to go to other countries. But now, with some different type of situation. I mean, Japan is a little bit less accessible in terms of setting up operation there. Hong Kong and Taiwan were great a few years ago, but maybe a bit more unstable now. Singapore is also very good in terms of setting up your operation there, but you might be a little bit too far out from the rest of the region and the northern part of Asia. So I think Seoul is slowly becoming a more important hub for companies that are interested in the region and beyond. So I think it's a good place to be. I think you're more than welcome. Join us in this beautiful little country. I think we have a few more minutes, so I'd like to go on the last question, and it's probably Nael-Pierre and Tristan, and I'll add a few things as well. As a French startup, how would you approach a Korean VC or Korean corporate, assuming that you'd like to work with them or to get investment from them? Maybe Tristan, you can start, and Nael-Pierre and I will follow up.
Yeah, thank you. And so indeed, we have two corporate VC as part of our associates, shareholders, and we are very happy about that. So as a fact, yes, the two stories are different. One, yeah, I can name them, right? Hyundai, you guys contacted us. We were part of what you were looking for in terms of innovation for mobility. And so you were also quite in a hurry to participate to some deals. This happens for VC, for corporate VC. There are some windows where they are, trying to generate a quite big deal flow and to concretize, to sign some. If it is also a good time for the company, for the startup, then it can be very straightforward. And it was the case, and we were happy about this. We were opening around. Hyundai contacted us. We discussed only for a few months, and we could conclude. For SVIC, so Samsung Venture, it was quite different actually. It was not our initiative. We were not really looking for funds at the moment. I guess they knew that eventually we had one Korean shareholder already, but eventually we were working together, right? We had a nice joint development agreement, but it happens that the entity with whom we were working had just launched a fund that was managed by SVIC, and at the same time that they were working with us on a commercial agreement, they also wanted to invest. So they mandated this SVIC to actually do all the due diligence, negotiate. It happens that we could. It took a longer time because we were not ready, but a year after we were ready, and so we were very happy to allow the organization of a new round. So again, each stories are peculiar, but indeed and specific. But those are two examples. What I realized when I arrived in Seoul is that there were some French Korean investors there. I met them. They are very, very good. One of them is led by the president of the French Tech Seoul, Solomon. So this is also a very nice opportunity. Unfortunately, it was not the good time for us. Otherwise, we would have, I guess, a VC that is investing both in Korea and Europe.
Thank you, Tristan. That's true. We actually have a few Korean VCs now here. ROUSSELLE with Solomon, obviously, who's also, as you mentioned, the president of French Tech. So very nice and approachable. I think he must be in the plane at the moment, so that's why he's not here today. And also Corelia, I think Partech has a presence as well. So you have definitely a few more people. You have to find them, but they're here. Nael-Pierre, would you like to go and add a few things, or I can go and then I will leave the last words. Up to you.
No, I leave the last to the best, so you should go last. I'll very quickly. The only things I have to add very briefly, I'd say. So if you want to connect to a Korean corporate, obviously number one, go to the French Tech. But if you're not able to connect to the French tech, first thing is see if the corporate happens to have an overseas office. So for example, we have GS Futures in the US. Most of the Chibbles have operations in the US. Some of them, for example, Hyundai as well, have operations in Germany, or they might have in France, Samsung, and things like that. So that might be a first point of contact, knowing that in Korea, the investor base is relatively small and everyone roughly knows each other. The other thing is, of course, you can connect to directly to the VC teams in Korea. You can kind of either go to events or you can connect through LinkedIn. But something to keep in mind that may be valuable is, if the company is investing directly from the balance sheets, it doesn't really matter. They can do what they want. If the company is investing from a fund, many VCs in Korea and CVCs as well, which are just starting in Korea, get a lot of their money from the government, or they have restrictions from the government. And what that means is most of the time, approximately maybe 80% of their fund has to be invested in Korea. So if you have a fully Korean company, that really doesn't affect you. But if you are an overseas company fully, then they have that kind of 20% that they can invest in you. But it can be a little bit more tricky. So I'd say first thing, try and see if we have an overseas office. I think most of the Chibbles do, and some VCs do as well. And then after that, contact the companies directly. But keep in mind their limitations, and try to figure out exactly what value you could bring that they couldn't bring, that they couldn't get locally in Korea. And I think that, passing it on to Guillaume, that's something that you mentioned as an answer to a previous question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much. Exactly what you mentioned. I think it's good to, and for this, I had a few general points, and we would just have a couple of minutes, but do your homework. I think it's very important before contacting the teams. The Korean companies, the structure is usually very complicated. They have tons of affiliates that people don't really know about. Hyundai has around 55 affiliates, Hyundai Mobis, Hyundai Glovis, and they might be interested in what you do when the actual mother company is not. So I think it's very interesting to do this. You can find information on the internet. You can contact a few people as well. So do your homework, and that will allow you to understand everything. GS must have tons of affiliates. I think Samsung is the number one with 200 plus affiliates. So it must be a nightmare to go through all this. So do the homework, understand what they need. Usually, they are not corporates, or at least from at Hyundai, we're not sitting here waiting for the innovation to come. We have, and the R&D people have very clear strategic goals, and they are looking for very particular technologies. So they are not open to some random startups coming to them, but they will go out and look for them. So also doing your homework, understanding what their needs are, their long-term needs. And the last point quickly, and Tristan mentioned it, I think very often it's also a question of timing. Not that your company is not interesting or they're not interested in you, but at the moment within this team, it's not the right time. You might have a change of team leader. You might have a change of teams. It happens quite often in Hyundai. I think and Nael-Pierre could probably confirm as well. It happens quite often in Korean companies that teams are changing basically every 6 months. So a question of timing is important. So be aware of this and understand that you might need to spend some months talking to the same people. And for example, me, what I like to do is I set up, when the company is very interesting, but there is not an immediate interest, I set up a very quick monthly call with them when we have a 15-minute catch-up, just to keep in touch and understand what they are doing at the moment. And when I see an opening internally, then I try to push it. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There's no magical solution, but doing this is a good idea. And what you don't want to do is simply take the first no as a very strict and forever no, and get a little bit angry and then burn the relationship. I think it's really a no, and it's a no everywhere, but I think particularly in Korea, if you burn that relationship, you will have a hard time building it again after. So 3 little points, very much linked with what Nael-Pierre and Tristan mentioned. And I think we are 1 minute behind, so I probably will get yelled at if I keep talking. So I will just thank all our speakers. Hailey, great presentation. Thank you again. Nael-Pierre, Leo, GK, and Tristan. I think now we'll jump into networking sessions separately. So I guess, yes.
Thank you, Guillaume. It was great. I've seen that there are quite a few questions from students. I suggest that we do a specific table to answer to the students.
Sure. Yeah.
Because
very good idea. Very good idea. Yeah.
Thank you, Guillaume, again.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Guillaume.
Thank you, everyone. So just as Guillaume said, I'm going to quickly wrap up the session. Once the session ends, you're going to all go back to the lounge session part. So if you guys want to stay out, if you guys want to go talk to each other, you are way more than welcome. So yeah, thank you again for everyone, for the great speakers today. I think we had a lot of great insights from you, and thank you everyone for joining the session, of course. So we're gonna wrap up here for today, and can't wait to speak to you in the networking session. Everyone, bye.
Thank you, Isabel.
Thank you, Isabel. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.